Okay, Monsters and Magical Sticks again. We're on chapter 12, page 136, if you have the book. And it's entitled Unconscious versus Conscious. Among my many pet peeves, one stands out. Many people who utilize hypnosis, as well as therapists of all types, will pay lip service to the existence of a so-called unconscious. They will discuss unconscious processes, unconscious problems, and unconscious conflicts. Yet, when it comes to doing therapy, they act as if the unconscious doesn't exist. You could safely say that they are unconscious as to unconscious processes. They will attempt to explain to their patients in specific, logical detail just what the problem is and its solution is. Unless they are dealing with someone from another planet, their patient has probably heard all the logical advice they could give. The patient has probably heard the answer from many sources. If these facts were the solution, I'm sure they would have solved the problem. And now comes a little story, a Sufi tale, updated a little. He says, once upon a time, there was a young woman and a young man crawling around on their hands and knees. They seemed to be searching desperately for something. A kind and well-meaning stranger happened by and asked them, "What are you looking for?" They replied, "We're searching for some important keys that will unlock important doors in our lives." He said, "That sounds important. Let me help you look." The stranger got down on his or her hands and knees and began searching for the missing keys. And after a long while, the stranger stopped and said, "I can't find any keys here. Just where were you standing when you lost them?" The couple replied, "Oh, about 100 miles from here in an open field." The stranger said, "If you lost them in a field 100 miles from here, what are we doing searching here?" "Well," said the couple, "the light is very good here, and we already know the territory perfectly." Sub versus unconscious. Some individuals prefer the concept of a subconscious mind. I prefer the concept of the unconscious. According to the American Heritage Dictionary, the prefix sub implies lesser than, beneath or below, instead of parallel or equal. I like to believe that the two minds are equal, but different. In the most basic terms, I believe that unconscious mind means that of which we are not, at least for the moment, conscious. There are a multitude of processes that we become aware of consciously at different times and circumstances. There are many more processes that we may never or only seldom become conscious of. In spite of this lack of awareness, these processes are there and ongoing. For example, as you are reading these words, your heart has been beating. Until you read that statement, you were probably unconscious as to that process. Some of you may have difficulty experiencing that process now. But since you're reading this book, I'm assuming that you are alive, and therefore that process is continuing. The psychological unconscious. A few years ago, a research paper was published regarding the subject of unconscious processes. The gist of this paper was that by flashing words on a screen at a high rate of speed, euphemistically called subliminally, the subjects would evidence physiological responses without conscious awareness of the words. One experiment included the flashing of sexually stimulating material in the midst of a very dry intellectual movie. again at a speed that prevented the subjects from being aware of the material. Yet all of the subjects gave evidence of strong physiological arousal. Scientists must have difficulty staying tuned in, turned on. Science must have difficulty saying turned on. Okay, so they use the word physiological arousal instead of turned on. I got it. The researchers, based on the results of these and other so-called subliminal experiments, concluded that there is an unconscious process. They further concluded that not only are these unconscious processes occurring all the time, but we are most often unaware of not only the process, but how the process affects us. Howard Severin and Scott Dickman, in their paper, The Psychological Unconscious, stated, unconscious processes affect ongoing behavior and experience, even though the experiencer may be unaware of this influence. Dr. Milton Erickson, who has insisted for years that there is an unconscious process, upon hearing about the above quote discovery, said, this is a paraphrase, I'm not surprised that the scientific community is finally acknowledging the existence of the unconscious. What does surprise me is that they still insist that there is a conscious mind. There are some mind-brain researchers who claim that the so-called conscious reality is really a gift from our unconscious mind. That is, only when our unconscious mind makes our conscious mind aware of something does that something become part of our reality. A lie. What you are now about to read is a lie? I believe that it will be a useful lie. If you'll recall the material from chapter 10, Left Meets Right Meets Left, it was pointed out that the two hemispheres of the brain specialize. To recap briefly, the left, or so-called dominant hemisphere, deals with linear, digital, analytical, and logical processes. The right hemisphere domain is spatiality, imagery, color perception, kinesthetic recall, and creativity. It may be called the metaphoric mind. I would like you to accept now the lie that the left hemisphere may be conceptualized as the conscious mind, while the right hemisphere is the home of the unconscious mind. If you accept this untruth, you will be in very good company. There are many mind-brain researchers and scientists who accept and even spread this lie. They might even say that what we call unconscious processes match nicely with what is known about right hemispheric activity, and ditto for conscious processes, left hemisphere. Technically, it might be more accurate to state that both hemispheres engage in unconscious and conscious processes, and that neither hemisphere works totally independently of the other. Rather, there is a consistent interaction and interchange between the two. In referring to the location of consciousness and memory, Buzan and Dixon stated, it becomes clear, in fact, that such elusive phenomena were in some way distributed throughout the brain as a whole. However, some researchers of brain phenomena now make a distinction between mind and brain in what is termed the mind-brain dualism. If, in fact, such a dualism exists, scientists are not yet close to identifying where one starts and the other leaves off. Remember, I said that what you're going to read is a lie, so the above may be a lie also. Unconscious, conscious metaphor. While a separate left hemisphere conscious mind and right hemisphere unconscious mind may or may not exist, I find it a useful metaphor for my work with hypnosis. When engaged in so-called conscious work, I use facts, logics, and reason. When I move to doing hypnosis, I use stories, imaginistic recall, nonsense suggestions, and fantasy. In short, the language of the unconscious. I also accept that the two minds work in concert when not working in opposition. For example, you consciously see an individual standing on a street corner. Your unconscious mind takes in the total picture and goes through its file cabinet of memories and comes up with a recognition. This recognition is then sent to your conscious mind, and you recognize a friend you haven't seen in years. An example we have all experienced: we are introduced to someone. Several hours later, we try to recall their name, but to no avail. We have forgotten. We struggle for a while and then say, to hell with it. Later, as we are busy at some other task, the name suddenly pops into our conscious mind. We weren't even aware of the process of remembering. This is a simple but descriptive example of one unconscious process. However, there are many other unconscious processes that may not be so innocuous. They may even be painful. Unconscious protection. Dr.